So recently we had an interesting little bit of news, a confrontation that I would have never expected to see. We actually saw Tim Pool, call out Andy No for irresponsible journalism on Twitter. Now, certainly had my disagreements with Tim Pool, and that's putting it lightly, but I have to say, I think he's spot on this one. So before we talk about that, we need to address really quickly who Andy No is. And I mean, anyone who's watching this already knows who he is, or at least most of you are. But basically, Andy No is a... Does he admit to being right-wing? He's right-wing. Okay. He's a right-wing... let's call him a journalist charitably for now. And he grew to fame doing very public denunciations of anti-fascist organizers, especially in Portland. And what he does, essentially, is he goes to these anti-fascist demonstrations and he finds ways to make them look bad. The most common ways in which he does this is by selectively editing recordings that he takes to make the anti-fascist groups look as bad as possible. I mean, you can go through the archives, and that's not really what this is about, but there have been many, many instances of him, like, filming events where the far right will attack anti-fascists, but then he'll like start the clip as the anti-fascist attack back, and then it's like, oh god, the anti-fascists, they do this, they do that. Anyway, the reason why I say, journalists with Andy No is because well, I guess mostly because of this, everything bad that he's done, evidently speaking, kind of pales in comparison to this. So on account of evidence brought to court in a separate case, there is actually video footage of Andy No being with and planning violence with a far-right group shortly before they engaged in an attack on a group of others. Andy No was... The only reason this was caught was because there was actually a left-leaning plant in this group. But Andy No was meeting with these far-right militants who were planning violence for which they were caught and arrested, by the way. And we can see, that's right, that's Andy No right there. Now, Andy No's, line, whenever he talks about Antifa, is these people are violent, they're destructive, I'm just trying to bring light to the violence. I think this shows what a disingenuous statement that is. Because Andy No will not only see the planning for far-right violence, he will actually participate in it, being friendly with the people planning to engage in far-right violence. And he has his camera on him. He's not recording anything because he doesn't care. That's why I don't call him a journalist. A journalist's job is to find the truth. He's more like, I think even agitator would be a little bit charitable. I think he's a propagandist, first and foremost. His job is to use any available information, any camera trick, any angle, any story that he can to get you to believe a given political perspective. And I ask you, if you like Andy No and you're watching this, can you really defend him palling around with far-right militants, not recording, not publicizing anything, only being made public after the fact because of court evidence that was brought to light in a completely separate incident? Is there really, a defense of this? Not really, no. The only thing that you have to admit to accept that reality is that Andy No doesn't actually care about violence. He just cares about framing Antifa and the left as a whole as looking bad, which makes him not a journalist, pretty much by definition. Anyway, he lost his job at the Quillette after that, and I mean, it was a pretty embarrassing PR move for him, but he just kind of hopes people forget, much like the concrete milkshake thing. Remember back in 2019 where somebody threw a milkshake at him and he said, that was a concrete milkshake. The milkshake was made of concrete. And it wasn't, it was just a milkshake. It's good stuff. It's good stuff. Wasn't it vegan milkshake? Oh, I don't know. I just know it wasn't concrete. I mean, he's a wacky guy, Anyway, Andy No's whole career is like this, okay? Andy No's whole career is essentially being the cry bully, feigning victimhood. Whenever he gains popularity, whenever he goes trending or viral, it's usually because he has inserted himself into a situation where he is adjacent to violence, and then he exaggerates to the highest possible degree the extent to which he has been a victim of that violence. Oh yeah, for a while he faked a British accent. I don't know what that was about. He doesn't have a British accent, but for a while he was faking it in public interviews. Maybe it was because of his brain trauma, right? For a while he went on this arc saying that that he had brain trauma, and we got this tweet, by the way, which was quickly deleted afterwards, but I was holding a container of fruit with both hands. Then suddenly I just dropped it. It landed all over the feet and floor. I looked down and couldn't help but think this had to do with the brain injury. Maybe I'm wrong. The attackers robbed me of confidence in holding my own food. Absolutely spectacular tweet. Really a banger. The reason I'm comfortable making fun of this is because there wasn't really any evidence of brain damage. He was injured at a point during one of these protests, and then he played it up. I mean, he played it up so hard. Constant photos, fundraising, hundreds of thousands raised for his brain injury. He hasn't, to my knowledge, demonstrated any symptoms of brain injury at all. Like, he continues to run around and do stuff in public. He just seems like a guy who will, like, he's like the kind of guy who's trying to get the other person red carded in soccer, you know what I mean? Like, somebody will, like, walk past him and shoulder check him, and he'll go flying backwards, you know, and he'll smash his head against the concrete, and he'll die, but then he'll come back to life, and, you know, he does that whole thing. Anyway. So, we've sufficiently poisoned the well, okay? We've poisoned the well. Now you all know why I don't take Andy No seriously, why I think he's a propagandist, why I don't think anyone who believes in understanding what goes on at anti-fascist protests should ever listen to him, you know? A recent incident took place. This was from 5 days ago. Portland protesters chase, tackle, and punch someone they believe to be Andy No until he hides in the Nines Hotel. So, essentially what happened was there was a peaceful protest, and it was, by the way, it was a peaceful protest that took place. A small crowd of leftist protesters, approximately 75, they threw some raw eggs at at the Justice Center before peacefully marching through the downtown, chanting and beating drums. Lovely, based, excellent, what have you. Anyway, rumors were circulating that a person by the name of Andy No was amongst the anti-fascist protesters. So, you know, rumors circulated, and it looks like one person was singled out as being that Andy No. The imposter was found, and they chased him for a while, and then they beat him up, and then he ran to the Nines Hotel screaming, "They're going to kill me, they're going to kill me." Something like that. Later, 5 days after the attack, Andy No confirms that he was indeed that individual. So, there are a few things that I want to talk about here really, really quick, okay? First of all, and I cannot say this strongly enough, okay? If you are Antifa or part of an anti-fascist protest, and you say, there's a far-right journalist in our midst who's made a living off of exaggerating and playing up the violent tendencies of our movement. Let's beat him up. You are it is impossible to describe how unfathomably unworthy you are of participating in any kind of activism or engagement, okay? It is you do not deserve to go outside and to represent any kind of political movement, okay? In fact, you should go outside and represent right-wing political movements so you can make them look terrible and do bad things to them, okay? That's what you should do, all right? You should go over there and you should worm on in from the inside, okay? I genuinely cannot fathom the process on this. If you find an agitator in your midst, do you know what you do? Confront them. Hey, dude, are you Andy No? Seriously? You're here? He's got a camera somewhere on him. Hey, you're Andy No? Seriously? You want to march with us? We don't really want you with our group. Can you, like, leave? We don't like you very much. Like, seriously, can we? And then, like, if you want to, like, move them out of the crowd, do that. Okay? Record it, by the way, too. If you find out that he's in your crowd, record him. Turn it on the other, flip the script. Record him. Get his reactions. How does he act? Does he act cringe? Does he freak out? Does he get violent? What does he do? Okay? Flip the script. All you're doing is playing into everything he tries to portray anti-fascists as by running around beating up. Why? Seriously, I don't even want to argue about this. Anybody who thinks that's justified because of what a POS Andy No is, that's not how this works, okay? That's not how anything works, all right? Are you against anti-fascist aggression in general or against aggression just against Andy No? Wait, don't attack people who aren't doing anything. Wait, hold on. Is this a joke? If you're Antifa or anyone else, you can't just attack people who aren't doing anything. You realize that, right? Even if they're Andy No, even if they're a literal like fascist, you can't do that, okay? We quadruple the fact that you can't do that if they are a literal propagandist agitator whose job it is to cry bully on camera, okay? Like, seriously. What if we really, really dislike them? Well, you know, have fun with your, yeah. Couldn't you argue that a fascist is doing violence by having a platform and then getting people on their side? You're helping that process. If that's the argument, you're helping them. The Antifa people who beat up Andy No were doing the the fascist propagandizing by giving them material. You're helping them in that process. This is a joke? So punch a Nazi is bad. There's a pretty huge difference between a broader like anti-fascist versus fascist engagement where like a person runs up and does like a little sneaky deck or like groups fighting one another and a person in a group surrounded getting beaten up on by a mob. Is this a joke? I actually can't tell. Why are there so many CIA agents in chat? What is the trolling going on here? Why are you doing this to me? Please stop, okay? I'll tell you this much, okay? If all Antifa and anti-fascist organization was done in the light and the purview of what you people wanted, the world wouldn't need Andy No because you would be just as bad as they portray you as, okay? Dude, this shop is associated with fascists. Let's burn it. Let's blow that. Well, this old grandma said a nice thing to let's kick her and punch her and like, come on, seriously? Whatever. Ignore the 13-year-olds in chat, okay? We're moving forward with this. And a reminder that all these people are an extreme minority, and they're online, and that none of the people, by the way, who just disagreed with me right now have ever touched grass or been outside. At no point have they ever been outside, okay? Anyway, so Andy No acknowledged that this was, in fact, him, okay? Indeed, it was indeed him, okay? Now, Andy No, you know, he's on Twitter. He's posting pictures of, you know, him having, like, scrapes on himself. I think he's got, like, a bloody eye or something. He does look a little roughed up. Anyway. Now we get to the quality stuff. Tim Pool. So here's Andy No. Statement on May 28th. Antifa assault. No journalist in America should ever face violence for doing his or her job. Yet on Friday, May 28th, Antifa tried to kill me again while I was reporting on the ongoing protests and riots in Portland, Oregon. For a new chapter of my book, Unmasked... See, look at how effectively you all have challenged the fascist narrative on this. Boy, being randomly violent to a person who wasn't, like, who was just, like, standing in a group of 70 of your allies sure did lead to you successfully dismantling the fascist narrative. 30,000 likes. I was chased, attacked, and beaten by a masked mob baying for my blood. Had I not been able to shelter wounded and bleeding inside a hotel while they beat on the doors and windows like animals, I wonder whether or not this is true. Probably not. There is no doubt in my mind I would not be here today. Their words, like their actions, speak for themselves. And then we see screenshots of people from my chat on Twitter. And then it goes on forever and ever and ever and ever and ever. This isn't Andy No. I don't know what this is. Anyway. Tim Pool hitting on here, okay? What purpose was served by trying to infiltrate Antifa? Some journalists can't cover certain topics. Women were barred from reporting from Tahrir by some outlets due to violence against women specifically. This was pointless and unbelievably stupid. Andy going into the fray with no security and no plan is not reporting. It's tribal spectacle. I was barred from reporting places, and I refused to support journalists purposefully escalating risk and danger. This is the most true thing I have ever seen in my life. This is some Tim Cool content right here, okay? For so many reasons, okay? Calling Andy No out correctly on what Andy No is actually doing. Not journalism, but baiting, okay? Imagine, for example, that you're like a pro-Israeli reporter, you know, a pro-Israeli journalist. Not just a pro-Israeli journalist. You're like on the far right, you're pro-apartheid, you've called like Arabs animals, etc., etc. And then you go into Gaza and go find like pro-Palestinian marches and just like shuffle around in there. What do you think is going to happen? Obviously, violence is going to happen. And then you cover that violence and you cry baby and you whine and you say this is why all of the Palestinian people are pro-Hamas and anti-Semitic and why they're all violent and blah, 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 blah. Okay? The thing is, you're not actually engaging in journalism here. What you're doing is you're creating a situation where violence is near guaranteed, and then you're creating a spectacle out of that violence. If Andy Ngo was actually interested in covering or reporting anything that was taking place, he would have been on the sidelines. Or with his massive amount of money and influence, he would have sent somebody in for undercover camera work that wasn't as recognizable as Andy Ngo. Because that way, there wouldn't have been the same elevated risk of violence that would have led to the spectacle that he was deliberately trying to bait. The goal here was never to cover what was happening. The goal here was to make something happen. And that's not journalism. Journalists do not make the news. They cover the news. Andy Ngo's goal was to make the news. He didn't want to write the headline. He wanted to be the headline. Very big difference, and not something journalists typically do. In fact, something they basically never do unless circumstances force them into it. But this has been Andy Ngo's job for years now. Maximize the likelihood that he has something bad happen to him, so he gets to be the star of the show, so he gets to make a lot of money off of GoFundMes, and he gets to sell his book, and he gets on the New York Times bestseller list. It's all a big clout game for him, and it does us a tremendous political disservice for a number of reasons, not the least of which is because I think there are a lot of fans of Andy Ngo who don't realize that Andy Ngo is in favor of the violence that happened to him. That's the reason why, by the way, I'm not too sympathetic to Andy Ngo, okay? I still think the Antifa people who attacked him are morons, but Andy Ngo is pro-violence. He'll stand with far-right militia groups and nod along as they plan to attack people. He's explicitly in favor of that. He is okay with that. So how bad am I really supposed to feel for him that it also happens to him when he deliberately agitates it? Keep in mind, he agitated this. It's not like a group of Antifa people were all like nodding around and then like chased after him out of nowhere impromptu. He created the initial situation. Andy Ngo remains the victim of things no worse than what he perpetuates to others. Does that make it good? No. Does it make Andy Ngo a clown? Yes. And it means that Tim Pool is based in Red Pilled in this instance. Absolutely, 100%, without a doubt, no denying it. Absolutely spectacular stuff from Tim Pool over here. Cannot deny it, okay? And it's important to call stuff like that out. It is.